Good afternoon and welcome to this presentation which I call as Codifying Devops. And what we're going to begin with is the whys of DevOps. Why do we really care about it? Why should you care about it? And how it all started. Now, before we get into what DevOps is, we're going to start talking about why should you care about it. And I'm going to explain these concepts or the story by talking about two stories of two completely different companies in a completely different segment, and something that you can relate to, as well as something that I have observed as part of my DevOps journey. The first story is about the demonetization. Now, I'm not going to talk about the ATM lines and the ATM queues. We've had enough of that. But I'm going to talk about some of the organizations who leveraged this demonetization drive, and immediately after demonetization, after that 85% of the currency was taken out of market, and that pushed people to use digital payment. Apart from the cards payment, there were companies like Paytm, right, who were digital wallets. And even though Paytm had a pretty decent sized user base before that, on the November 9th, when the people at Paytm woke up, they found that their systems or the traffic for their systems was increased by 4.5x times. And they, not only the traffic, it's not just the new number and new people who were trying to use Paytm. It were a lot of the transactions where their existing customers loading the cash to the wallet, and they saw like 10 times the number of transactions where people were actually loading the cash, right? And apart from that, they had like 5 million transactions happening at that time, and they saw like surge in the amount of application downloads on the same day, right? So much so for one day. And here you're not left with an option than to adopt, than to change, than to manage this traffic, right? Now the first challenge that Paytm team had was handling the scale, and actually they did gracefully well to do that, right? And their systems were built to scale and they were resilient, and when you have these kind of situations, you definitely need to sort of leverage cloud or things like that, right? If you don't have cloud, or if you're not on cloud, or if you don't have a strategy for cloud, it's almost impossible to survive in the market where you see like 5 times surge in the traffic that you don't even expect overnight. Definitely not overnight, right? And that's what this first challenge, and they managed that well for most of the time actually. The second thing that the challenge is it's not just handling the scale. It's not just being about being available, right? You also have to make sure all those transactions, all those people who are trying to make those transactions have to go through, right? So you have to take care of reliability. You have to make sure that your systems are able to perform those many transactions. Your all these interconnections, all those applications are ready for that. And if not, what would happen is you're on the front page, right? So that happened actually once. I mean, for most of the period, they were pretty reliable, but there was a time, I think one day their system was down, and that results in angry customers, frustrated customers. Some people would also probably just leave you, or some people would be very, very unhappy or paranoid because it's all about money that people were loading, right? And sometimes they were left with nothing at all. And what is important here, the point to note is, if your systems are not reliable, if you're not scalable enough, you cannot even survive this market. People will just leave you and go to the next application that they know of, and that's what we are talking about, right? The next challenge they had was staying on top of things, and also being able to innovate and adapt to the situation, because the market situation has changed suddenly and you have to react to it. And how do you react to it is by responding to the change, by responding to the customer requirements, new requirements, and being able to experiment and possibly out-experiment your competitors, right? That's how you stay on top of your game. And they actually did that. They started releasing the new products, new applications, trying out new things. It's not that you have to succeed in all the changes that you make, but you should be able to experiment, which is a very important aspect of responding to the market. And also they actually released a product and then it didn't take off, so they rolled it back as well, right? So it's okay to fail, but what is important is fail fast and roll back fast, right? So you need to have an ability to do that. And they fulfilled all these challenges. They could survive. Not only survive, they came out really successful out of it. So now they have, when they released their numbers at the end of the year, they had about 147 million transaction users. That's the size of population of Russia actually, or approximately 5 times the population of Australia, right? So those many users, handling those many users, staying on top of their requirements. They had about 80 million active users in the month of December, by the month of December, and they had done about 2 billion user sessions in the last 1 year, right? And they're now pretty close to, actually, the number they released from 147, they're now pretty close to 200 million users, user base by, I think, the last month, when they released their numbers, right? And that's quite a fascinating story. And that's exactly what tells us why we need DevOps. Because if you want to respond to change and change really fast without losing the quality, that's very important, right? That's one story. Now, this story is where the company is, it's a pretty recent, pretty new company, right? So it's an internet company, and you may say that it does not have legacy systems, and it is generally easier to do things when you don't have a legacy, right? That may be right, and that's what brings us to the second story.